In this video, I'm going to quickly run through the 10 color pairs in Brothers War Limited, the signpost uncommons for each archetype, and some key commons to look out for. The goal is to get you up and running quickly for your first few drafts. Let's get to it. Up first is Blue-White Soldiers. This is the signpost uncommon, Yoshin Tactician. For 4 mana, you get a 3/4 that pumps all of your soldiers. This deck wants to play an aggressive tempo-style game by casting some early flying threats, like Ambush Paratrooper, Air Marshal, and Wing Commando. Then, keep your opponent off balance while you beat down with cards like Scatter Ray, Machine Over Matter, and Urza's Rebuff. Recruitment Officer and Zephyr Sentinel are powerful uncommons for this archetype. Up next is Blue-Black Draw 2. The signpost uncommon is Evangel of Synthesis, a 2-mana 2/3 that loots when it enters the battlefield. And as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards in a turn, the Evangel gets +1/+0 and Menace until end of turn. Cards like Combat Courier, Scrapwork Rager, and Mightstone's Animation allow us to draw extra cards to trigger our stuff, while also building our board. And in and of itself, drawing cards is obviously good. Thopter Mechanic and Gurgling Anointer are powerful uncommons for Blue-Black. Next, we have Red-Black Sacrifice. The signpost uncommon is Junkyard Genius, a 3-mana 2/2 that creates a Power Stone when it enters the battlefield. It also has an activated ability for 3 mana plus sacrifice another creature or artifact to give your whole team +1/+0, Menace, and Haste until end of turn. Thraxo Demon, Killzone Acrobat, and Power Stone Fracture are all fantastic sack outlets. Cards like Goblin Blast Runner and Gixian Infiltrator benefit from you sacrificing permanents. This deck will also play really well with the returning mechanic Unearth, which allows you to recast certain cards from the graveyard. Also, there is a steel card in this set, Sibling Rivalry. This will be a powerful card for this archetype. Next is Red-Green Power Stone Midrange. The signpost is Arbalist Engineers, a 3-mana 2/2 that can either deal 1 damage to any target, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and give it trample and haste until end of turn, or create a tapped Power Stone. This is a straightforward red-green beatdown deck that wants a good curve of creatures like Argothian Sprite, Rock Hunter, and Argothian Opportunist, but also benefits from the Power Stones generated by cards like the Opportunist and Excavation Explosion. Back up your attackers with combat tricks like Giant Growth, Gaia's Gift, and Whirling Strike. Giant Cindermaw and Obstinate Baloth are solid uncommons for this deck. Next up is Green-White Artifacts ETB Matters. Yoshin Dissident is our signpost uncommon, a 2-mana 1/1 that allows you to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control. Power Stone Engineer, Argothian Opportunist, and Stone Retrieval Unit easily make Power Stones, and cards like Phalanx Vanguard, Perimeter Patrol, and Warlords Elite all make good use of them. Thopter Architect and Alloy Animist are fantastic uncommons for this archetype. Next is Black-White Power 3 or Less Matters. Our signpost uncommon for this archetype is Hero of the Dunes, a 5-mana 3/2 that returns an artifact or creature with mana value 3 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. It also grants creatures with mana value 3 or less +1/+0. I'm curious to see how this deck plays out, but I'd build it as a more controlling value deck with recursion, like Recommission, No One Left Behind, and Emergency Weld, plus good removal, like Prison Sentence and Overwhelming Remorse. Goring Warplow is quite strong here, trading off early, then being able to recur it later. And this is probably the one deck that would actually play Yoshin Medic. Good uncommons for this archetype are Thran Vigil and Disciples of Gix. Next up is Blue-Red Prowess, the classic Blue-Red Spells deck. Third Path Iconoclast is our signpost, a 2-mana 2/1 that makes a 1/1 whenever you cast a non-creature spell. Curate, Machine Over Matter, and Whirling Strike are cheap ways to trigger your prowess creatures, like Dwarven Forge Chanter and Wing Commando. Levitating Statue and Monastery Swiftspear are some excellent uncommons to look out for. Our next archetype is Green-Black Graveyard. The signpost uncommon is Skyfisher Spider, a 4-mana 3/3 that allows you to destroy any non-land permanent if you sacrifice another creature when it enters the battlefield. You can also exile it from your graveyard when it dies to gain life equal to the number of creatures in your graveyard. This deck relies on Self-Mill from cards like Wasteful Harvest and Ravenous Gigamole to fill your graveyard. Gixian Skullflayer gains a counter every turn if there are 3 or more creatures in your graveyard, and Gnarlroot Pallbearer grants a huge buff to another creature. This deck will also play well with the recursion in black like Emergency Weld. Gaia's Courser and Battlefield Butcher are strong uncommons for this deck. Next is Classic Red-White Aggro, and our signpost uncommon is Falaji Vanguard, a 4-mana 2/3 first strike that grants a creature +2/+0 until end of turn whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control. Play cheap creatures like Survivor of Corliss, Yoshin Frontliner, and Rock Hunter, then push through damage with Whirling Strike and Military Discipline, and finish them off with a well-timed Mishra's Onslaught. Recruitment Officer and Horn Stoneseeker should be strong in this archetype. Finally is Blue-Green Power Stone Ramp. Our signpost uncommon is Battery Bearer, a 4-mana 3/4 that grants our other creatures tap to add a colorless mana that can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. Like Power Stones, it can be spent on activated abilities though. Whenever you cast an artifact spell with mana value 6 or greater, draw a card. Ramp and hit your land drops with Sentinel Stalwart, Blanchwood Prowler, and Argothian Opportunist. Then cast giant artifacts like Depth Charge Colossus and Rust Goliath. Sarenth Steelseeker and Urza Powerstone Prodigy should be premium uncommons for this archetype.